You won't be perfect as a leader. I'm telling you that. You have everything you need to be successful. You are not deficient. You are not broken. If this is a role that you want to be successful in, you have everything you need to be successful. A leader's job is to really get the best performance from each individual employee.
Hello. Hey, friend. Okay, so we got to pick up where we left off because there are some things that were left unsaid. And before we do that, I want you to check in with you. A lot of times when folks ask how we're doing, it's more of a greeting rather than an actual question, but this is a real question. How are you doing? Take stock of what's going on with you, whether that is, how it's showing up in your body. Are there any places you're tense? Are you feeling excited? Do you have the butterflies of joy happening right now? What is happening in your life? And then I want you to take that deep, full breath in, and I want you to release it and be present for what we're getting ready to talk about today, because this is for you. This is for us. So today I have brought on a friend that we're excited to all meet together. And so this is important and this is intentional, because I know that you're in a season of your life where you are feeling called to use your voice and to show up. And it feels a little uncomfortable. And you feel a little out of your element, but life has saw fit to propel you forward. So I want to make sure you have the tools and resources to do so. So without further ado, let me introduce my friend today, Hunter Haines. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great, Victoria. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm happy to have you here. We met at a networking space. And so I kind of want to go back to that energy, because there's something that happens where everyone comes up to you and says, hey, how are you? What do you do? And I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little stuck with how I introduce myself. And so I want to know, how do you introduce yourself when you're in those spaces and people come up to you and say, hey, Hunter, what do you do?
That's a great question. I help leaders hit the reset button when they're not getting the results they want leading people.
Wow. Okay, so tell me more about that reset button. What does that mean?
Yeah, so a lot of times leaders feel stuck. They're trying to gain commitment from a group of people. They're trying to achieve performance. And honestly, people just won't do what they want them to do. And they feel stuck. And they doubt themselves and they wonder if they're in the right role. Should they be in a leadership role? And I help them do some clarity work and really take a look at who they want to be as a leader, and help them get unstuck.
We can all say we felt that, where people are not doing what we want them to do. And we know best, right?
Right.
And so this is interesting, because a lot of times we perceive leaders as having all the right answers, having it together, and that's how they got there. And so what does it feel like for people when they're coming to you and they're saying, people are not doing what I need them to do, or I feel like I'm failing as a leader? How do they describe that feeling? Because this is new to us. Leaders don't have it together.
Yeah. So it's challenging for them, because typically I work with people who are brilliant at whatever it is they do. And they're used to having the right answer, and they're used to knowing how to get things done. But when it comes to leadership, they may just not have learned how to get the best results from people. So they're stuck because what they've used before to be successful isn't working in their leadership role.
So you're telling me we don't have to be perfect to be a leader?
You won't be perfect as a leader. I'm telling you that.
What a relief.
Leadership is hard, right? Leadership is hard. And most people get into leadership because they're good at technical skills, at whatever it is they do. And then they get put into this role where they have to gain commitment and get performance through other people. And they're just not sure how to do that. So, but here's the thing, that's their job.
Yeah.
Leaders get paid more typically to do that. It is their job. We don't really say it this way, but a leader's job is to really get the best performance from each individual employee. That's their job. Otherwise, we wouldn't really need them in a leadership role. So they're being paid more to do it. And have you ever worked for a bad boss?
Let's not talk about that.
Most of us have, right? And most of us, sometimes we wonder, like, what value is that person adding? But their job is to develop engaged and high-performing employees and to develop cohesive and high-performing teams. But quite often, they're not really in touch with that. And if they are, they often don't know how to do it.
So what have you noticed in your extensive experience around the traits that people have who are really good leaders?
Yeah, they tend to have really strong, high emotional intelligence. And by that, I mean self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, meaning they pick up on the emotions of others, and they're really good relationship managers. They pay attention to relationships, and they take accountability when relationships aren't going well. They step up and they make changes to improve the relationships. So those are the top traits of an effective leader.
What's really funny and unexpected is that I feel like you are describing the superpowers of introverts, but yet we're not often seeing ourselves as potential leaders.
Yeah, no, introverts are great leaders. I mean, they have a lot of strengths. People who have a preference for introversion are those people who tend to process internally. So they think before they speak. Imagine that. Because those of us who are extroverts have a tendency to speak before we think. But you all already knew that, right? So introverts, you're right, have a lot of strengths. They tend to be very thoughtful in their approach, and they've really thought through what they want to say before they say it. Unfortunately, those can be overdone strengths. Because that's a strength, but if you overdo it, it might not be really helpful for you. And here's why. If you don't speak up and speak out loud, the rest of us will make up what you think. So if you are an introvert, a lot of introverts that I work with have a tendency to feel misunderstood often, or I don't know even why they said that, because I never said that. But it's because we made it up.
Wow.
Because in the absence of information, we make it up.
Wow. So how can someone overcome that struggle? Because it sounds simple. Okay, just use your voice and speak up. But for an introvert, that doesn't always feel as easy as it sounds simple. So how have you seen introverts be able to find their voice?
When I work with all leaders, and this is particularly helpful for people who have a preference for introversion, I start with the clarity work. And I start with, one, what are you getting paid for? What's your job? In terms of leading people. I mean, I know your job is to get X, Y, and Z performance targets, but what are you responsible for in terms of leading people? And generally that is to develop engaged and high-performing employees. So that's number one. What are you being paid for? What are the expectations? Two, who do you want to be as a leader? You can be any kind of leader you want. So who do you want to be as a leader? Then I work with my clients around where are the lanes that you should be swimming in when you're leading people. And the lanes are really performance, conduct or behavior, and development. But those are the three areas that you as a leader of people are really responsible for: performance, behavior, and development. If you're not in one of those lanes, you might be out of scope there. So then we think about, so how do you do that? And there's a pretty simple way to do that in terms of clarifying expectations, providing feedback, providing coaching, and then holding people accountable. up to and including termination, which sounds harsh, but you're paying people to do a job. So if you've given them clear expectations and you've given them feedback and supported them and coached them and they're still not doing their jobs, then maybe that's not a right fit. Maybe my guess is they're not happy either. So that's sort of some of the ways that I approach it.
That is really good and clarifying. I want to take it back to, let's say it's day one, right? As you said, the person is being highlighted because they're off the chart in their skill level. And so now they're having that conversation with their boss and they're being promoted, or, they have decided to start their own business. So now they're the boss, whatever that elevation path looked like for them. And now they're realizing, oh, I girl boss too hard and now I'm in charge of people. Like, what can they do in that moment to grapple with the transition?
Yeah, so I recommend, and I work with clients all the time who are transitioning from either into a new manager role they've never led before. So those folks really need to think about, what does it mean to lead? And going back to the questions I asked, what are they being paid for? And who do they want to be as a leader? And really spending some time reflecting on that. I work with leaders who are transitioning from one leadership role to another and want to set themselves up for success. And sometimes it's a promotion. So I was a manager, now I'm a director. What's different about the role of the director that I didn't have when I was in a manager role? Or sometimes, Victoria, leaders are peers with people, and then they get promoted and now they're the boss and they have to lead people who were their direct peers. And that can be uncomfortable. I mean, they may know things, you've shared things with them and that's a different relationship. And in those cases, which happens a fair amount, I really work with the leader to sometimes have sort of an awkward conversation with that person. Maybe that person applied for the role and didn't get it, and you did, and that puts an even extra element of awkwardness to it. So sometimes that requires a difficult conversation, and it really is about saying things like, I know this is a little awkward for me. It may be awkward for you that I'm now in this role, but I want to assure you that my job is to help you be successful. That's what my job is, and that's what I intend to do. So having a little dialogue about the difference in the relationship now that I've gone from peer to manager. Those are some of the things.
What I love is that framework starts with acknowledging what's happening. Right? It's not overlooking. It's not jumping towards, you need to get in line. It's that thing you said earlier about emotional intelligence, which is, I'm aware of how you feel. I'm aware of how I feel. So let's just say it out loud. Let's start there.
Right. And what do we want this relationship to be? So you two can co-create that new relationship together. And you have inside information about what's important to that person and what makes that person tick. So you're really a step ahead. You can co-create that new relationship.
Wow. That feels really empowering. I love that. So tell me more about dealing with difficult people. What do you feel like are the top struggles that you hear leaders voice when it comes to what they're feeling about the difficult people that they're now tasked with managing and leading? And how do they navigate those waters?
Great question. So I had in my almost 40-year career in human resources, I've had the opportunity to facilitate many leadership development courses. And I would often ask, what is the most difficult thing about leading people? And the number one answer was personalities. Number one, personalities, difficult personalities. And difficult personalities often translates to people don't do what I want them to do. Right? That's difficult because they're not doing what I want them to do. And what I have learned is that when you see that kind of, sometimes described as like ugly behavior, like people are just not on board, they're not committed, they're resisting change. Often when you see that, it has nothing to do with the work itself and everything to do with the fact that they don't feel valued or respected. So I really, when I work with leaders and I'm helping them to build stronger relationships or repair relationships, we're using those emotional intelligence skills, and we're really looking at what is the relationship now? What's the level of trust in that relationship? What have you done to build that trust? How do you build trust? And what do you want that relationship to be? And have you told them that? What do you value about that person? Do they know that? So often when I talk with leaders and they'll say, oh yeah, they're a great employee. They are great at partnering with other departments. And I'll say, well, have you told them that? And they're like, well, no, I haven't. So that person has no idea that you value and respect them for the work, some of the work that they do, which means there's a lack of trust, which means they are not going to be fully listening to you. You're not getting the best of them because they're protecting themselves because you don't have a high level of trust.
Wow.
That was a lot.
No, it was good. It was so good. I really appreciate the piece around, it kind of goes back to what you said earlier about accountability. Like, what part are we playing in creating these dynamics that exist? And oftentimes it is what goes unspoken. And when it goes unspoken, like you said, like people make up in their mind, what is not being said. And so being really intentional about voicing, oh my goodness, you did so good with this. You were amazing at this. You led that meetings, like whatever it is for our people, making sure we're pouring into them like that was really good.
And I'll share with you that quite often I work with leaders who, when we talk about the importance of providing positive feedback to people, they will say, well, that's hard for me because I don't require a lot of positive feedback. And I'm like, that's okay. And you don't have to change. The problem is not everyone is the same as you. And typically we look toward our manager for approval and recognition, and we want to know that we're doing well. And most people, when you tell them that they're doing a good job, all they want to do is work harder.
Wow.
So it's free. But just because you don't need it or want it, that recognition, doesn't mean that it won't be a powerful tool in your leadership toolkit to help people feel valued, respected, build trust in relationships, and perform at their best.
I often see so many parallels between work and like our other relationships. Like we often think of the work that we do and we don't consider the fact that it's a relationship. And we spend so much time at our jobs, it is natural that we would look there for some source of identity development, identity reassurance.
Yes. Some of us more than others.
Yeah.
And there are studies and assessments you can take to find out how much you rely on work to get those interpersonal needs met. I am someone that work fulfills a lot of my interpersonal needs because of the nature of the work I do. I interact with people all the time. Some people, they don't look to work to meet those kinds of needs. But then you really need to ask yourself, is the leadership role right for you? Is it a fit for you? Do you want to be in the business of motivating and inspiring, being a transformational leader?
Yeah.
Is that the role that you want? Or do you just like the bigger paycheck?
And what if they're honest and they say, I just needed more money. The economy is crazy. And so this worked.
So is it making you miserable? Or are you doing okay? I mean, if you're doing okay in it, then, it's just recognizing that long term, that may not be what you want to do. And you can still be successful.
A question that comes to mind, because I've heard this dynamic before, where the manager is maybe doing an incredible job of providing the support that their team needs. And in fact, it's almost like they're their own little community, right? Sheltered from all of the craziness that's happening in the overall company culture. And yet the hidden struggle of that manager is that they are fighting night and day to shelter their team from all the other things. And so I've heard this concept of like managing up. How does someone deal with that dynamic where they're thriving or their team is thriving, but they're struggling with all the things they have to manage to keep their team thriving?
Yeah, that is a great question. And that is really about a culture fit as well. And so that's also about having difficult conversations with your boss, your direct manager. There's a great book called The Courageous Follower by a guy named Ira Chaleff, Chaleff. And in this book, he talks about the importance of followers in terms of helping leaders be successful. So if you're the leader, and your boss is a leader, you want them to be successful, right? So the key is to build a trusting, strategic relationship with them, whereby you can be honest about what's going on and how it's impacting you. For example, you might say, you know that talk you gave at the town hall last week? My guess is that you intended for it to go over one way, but let me tell you how people heard it. Let me tell you about the meetings after the meetings. And you may not be aware of this, but I want you to be successful, so I'm choosing to tell you that. But that requires developing a trusting relationship with your leader and being a courageous follower and almost a partner to your boss to help them be successful.
Wow. So what shifts happen when someone is able to position themselves as a strategic partner for the leaders that are above them?
I think it's, it's really a shift from me to we, and from being on the ground to being at the 35,000 foot level and being able to understand the perspective of your manager as well, and being aware of what's going on in the organization. But you should also be sharing some of that with your team. And that's all about teaching organizational realities, like helping your team understand. For example, I had the pleasure of working in healthcare for a majority of my career. Healthcare is really hard. And so a leader needs to have conversations with their teams about that environment and what are the realities of that environment and what do we need to do as a team to be successful. So there are a couple of shifts.
That's so good. So, as you all can see, child, Hunter is bringing the heat.
Yeah, I love what I do. Leadership is hard.
Yeah.
Leadership is not easy. And a lot of leaders don't have, and we've talked about this before when we were networking, is that often, leaders are just expected to know how to lead. And nobody wants to admit that it's hard or that they're maybe failing or having challenges, because that gets to our credibility and nobody wants to admit that. We don't talk about leadership and effective leadership, and we don't talk about the competencies involved in leadership, that emotional intelligence, and how do you develop that in leaders. And if you are a leader of leaders, then you own leadership in your part of the organization.
Yeah.
Is it effective? Do people know how to lead? Are they effective leaders? Are you coaching them? Are you developing them? So we just don't talk about that enough. It's just assumed but we don't learn it in school typically, unless you're doing an MBA. It's very unlikely that you're going to study leadership. So I think organizations can do a better job of clarifying for leaders what their role is, what the expectations are, and then the measures of success, and then supporting their success by providing them with training and resources and coaching to help them be successful.
That being said, what I would love for you to do as we transition is for you to just speak directly to a leader who's listening. This can be something that they can play back when they're having a hard moment in their leadership journey, but just leave them with a message of just inspiration, hope, reassurance.
Yeah. Well, what I tell my clients when I first meet with them is you have everything you need to be successful. You are not deficient. You are not broken. And if this is a role that you want to be successful in, you have everything you need to be successful. So pause, take a deep breath, and find a mentor or a coach or someone who you can easily talk to about this to help you be successful. But you have everything you need to be successful.
Y'all heard that? And I want you to repeat it back to yourself. I have everything I need to be successful. So good.
Yes.
And I feel like you are that person that people, it's easy for them to talk to, for them to be honest about their journey, and to feel like you have all of the resources they need in order to be able to figure out what's next and make that next move and grow in their journey. And so for folks who are like, Hunter is my person, she's my coach, how do they stay connected with you?
The easiest way is to go to my website, which is hunterhainescoaching.com. And Haines is spelled Haines, hunterhainescoaching.com. And connect with me there, or connect with me in LinkedIn, reach out, say hello, say I heard you on Seeds of Hope, and I want to talk more. Have an introductory call with me and see whether or not you're in a situation where it might help you to have some support, some coaching to help you be successful if you're feeling like you could need it. And we all need help sometimes. So you're not alone.
And that is so funny that that's actually on brand. And I don't think you've ever heard an episode before, but that is literally how we end it, with "You are not alone."
Oh, no, get out. That's awesome.
I love that.
It's true. You're not alone. No, absolutely. And that's what I like to, usually, sometimes when I meet leaders, they are just downtrodden. I mean, they are pain. They're not sleeping well. They're not eating well. They're just, and I love helping leaders realize this is my life's work. And the reason that it's my life's work, Victoria, is because I believe that everyone deserves an effective leader. Everyone deserves an effective leader. And we've all had, hopefully we've had leaders that were like, oh my gosh, they just brought out the best in me. But we've also all had leaders where it's like, I don't even know if I can do another day, right? But everyone deserves an effective leader, and leaders are paid more. So leaders are accountable and responsible for bringing out the best in people, but sometimes they just don't know how. And that's where I come in, because I have the theoretical background and the experience and the resources and to help you feel like, oh, well, no wonder. Well, I never thought about doing it that way. Well, maybe I ought to try that. Trying new behaviors and seeing how it feels. Sometimes it just, you need a warm hand to help walk you through it.
Well, it's never too late to hit the reset button. And I'm really excited that you all were able to be a part of this conversation and tune in. And again, the reminder, you are not alone. We are all just figuring life out one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time. And I am excited to be here with you as you figure it out. Thank you, Hunter, for sharing your wisdom of your journey. I know that folks walked away with feeling empowered and also affirmed that it's okay if they're figuring leadership out while they're in the middle of leading, and that there are resources and support for them to be able to figure out how to grow in that journey, because we don't have to stay where we are. We don't have to stay stuck. It's never too late to hit the reset button. So until next time, y'all, bye.